I'll show you the dark side.
Kylo Ren is the main antagonist of the Star Wars sequel series that was carried on by Disney. He comes from a strong Force-sensitive bloodline, with his mother being Leia, which also makes his grandfather Darth Vader. He is the leader of the Knights of Ren and an enforcer of what is now the First Order. Although on paper, this sounds like a perfect character with lots of potential, his character development was rather disappointing, as he changed from a feared and distinguishable antagonist to an erratic and useless character who is stuck between good and evil. Kylo Ren's initial introduction in The Force Awakens got the audience prepared for a great antagonist. He comes out of his ship on Jakku in a village that his stormtroopers have burnt down, and his identity is hidden behind a mask. He then kills the village leader after he doesn't tell him what he needs to know. This is when PoE shoots at Kylo and he just stops the bolt mid-air. This whole scene was a great way to express Kylo's brutality and power in the Force, and his unknown identity and insanely cool lightsaber makes him look like a force to be reckoned with. This later turns out to be true when Kylo Ren and the First Order exploded a whole solar system with an upgraded Death Star, which killed millions of people. At the time this was very cool, but it didn't make much sense with the other movies, which I'll explain later. A while after, Kylo Ren captures the main protagonist, Rey, by using his super powerful Force sensitivity. However, as you know, this video is talking about Kylo's wasted potential, and the first thing that ruined him was this interrogation scene with Rey. Although I knew it had to happen at some point, Kylo taking off his mask and revealing just a young and not very scary guy took away from his fear factor. However, what was worse was Disney forcing a potential future romance between Kylo and Rey just after Kylo was involved in a mass killing of a solar system. This scene just felt odd and didn't suit his character prior. The next big part of Kylo Ren's character development is when he meets his father, Han Solo, before killing him with his lightsaber. Although some people didn't want to see Han Solo go, I think it was a good way to show how deep Kylo Ren is in the dark side. However, what wasn't good was the lightsaber fight scene that followed with Kylo Ren against Finn and Rey. This is because during this scene, Kylo had no lightsaber form, but is rather just swinging it around like a baseball bat. He is also fighting with too much anger and isn't completely focused. This whole scene makes him seem pathetic, especially as he is supposed to be one of the strongest dark side users of his time. However, people say that Kylo Ren was just messing around with Finn, and I can definitely agree he is not going all out. Furthermore, prior to the fight, Kylo was hit with Chewie's blaster crossbow, which we know can do a lot of damage. Either way, Kylo Ren ends up losing to Rey, who has never previously held a lightsaber, and gets a new scar on his face. Kylo Ren next appears in the second sequel film called The Last Jedi. We see him with his master, the Supreme Leader Snoke, who is basically mocking Kylo for losing to Rey. Kylo once again becomes angry and is put down and shown how he is just a pawn in a game. Kylo Ren then destroys his helmet. I think this was a way to show him rebelling against the Republic, and now he is a different person because he wants revenge. However, this pivotal moment was so bad for Kylo. Also, I think the mask was way too cool to destroy. After all this, Kylo Ren seems to be slowly heading towards the light side of the Force. Furthermore, Kylo Ren and Rey develop a connection in the Force, and they can see each other through the Force miles away. I think that this was a really cool idea, but there were some unnecessary romantic scenes. Also, it doesn't really make sense that Kylo Ren is falling in love with someone who he has chased down and tried to kill. However, what was cool in The Last Jedi was the backstory as to why Kylo Ren turned to the dark side. It includes flashbacks of when Luke Skywalker was training, who was Ben Solo, and Luke senses the dark side in Ben and decides he has to kill him. However, he didn't have the courage to actually kill him, and Ben wakes up and tries to defend himself. This was the whole reason why Kylo was chasing after Rey in the first place, as she had the map to Luke Skywalker by The Last Jedi. Kylo once again caught Rey, and this time took her to his master Snoke. Kylo was then demanded to kill Rey, but instead, in a change of events, he turns on his master and kills Snoke. Kylo and Rey then fight side by side against Snoke's Red Guards, basically saving each other, making it seem like Kylo Ren has finally joined the light side. However, after killing all of the guards, Kylo instead asks Rey to rule over the galaxy with him by becoming the new leader of the First Order. I hate his character development here, as he blatantly chooses the light side and immediately falls back to the dark side after everything he just did. Kylo Ren then uses his new leadership power to track down Luke Skywalker to get revenge. He once again is way too angry and fires all his weapons at Luke Skywalker, yet it didn't impact Luke at all. Kylo Ren then decides to try and fight Luke Skywalker in a lightsaber duel, but Luke just completely humiliates him, which angers Kylo Ren even more. What's worse is Luke Skywalker then lowers down his guard, and Kylo Ren realizes that Luke was never there in the first place and was actually force projecting himself to save the rebels. This last scene was just a cherry on top that showed Kylo Ren's downfall as a character in The Last Jedi, and it showed him as this overly emotional and useless character, which wasn't true in the first movie. Finally, we move on to the final sequel movie called The Rise of Skywalker. At the very beginning, Kylo Ren is seen fighting on Mustafar to obtain a Sith Wayfinder that supposedly led to Palpatine, who somehow came back from the dead. This Wayfinder then leads him to Exegol, which is where Palpatine has been all this time. The worst part about this whole thing is Kylo was meant to confront and kill Palpatine, as he was a threat, but instead he is perceived by Palpatine's offerings and instantly becomes his tool. One positive to Kylo Ren losing all his power was he got his really cool helmet fixed, and we get to see the Knights of Ren, although they never really seem to do anything. Besides reobtaining the mask, Kylo Ren repeats history and is tasked to prevent Rey from finding Palpatine on her own and destroying his plans. Rey and Kylo are united on a desert planet, only they are once again on polar opposite sides of the Force. But just before you think Kylo Ren's U-turn in his character arc is bad, he gets into a Force tug-of-war with Rey and is once again completely outmatched. This so-called Darkside Force Master just cannot win a single fight against Rey, and this really makes him look stupid. After Rey escaped from Kylo, they once again meet on a moon in the Ender system, where Rey is trying to find another Wayfinder to Palpatine. However, Kylo stops her. This led to Rey and Kylo trading and blocking lightsaber hits in an epic fight surrounded by water. This fight seems extremely close, and Kylo actually ends up winning the fight by knocking Rey down. However, in the next moment, he senses the death of his mother, Leia, and gets distracted, and Rey fatally wounds Kylo with his own lightsaber. Just after Kylo was wounded, Rey also senses the death of Leia and decides to use the Force to heal Kylo before running off and leaving him on his own. He then sees the Force ghost of his father, Han Solo. Han tries to comfort Kylo and reminds Kylo that he is Ben Solo and will always be his son. Kylo becomes touched by this and throws away his lightsaber and finally proves he is heading towards the light side. However, what I still really don't understand is how Han Solo convinced Kylo to become good when he already tried and failed. Anyways, the redeemed Ben Solo then returns to Exegol and fights his own Knights of Ren. He is completely outnumbered and is noticeably struggling without a weapon. In another part of Exegol, Rey is attempting to confront Palpatine, but Palpatine is using her rage to try and make her into a Sith Lord. This is until Ben reached out through the Force and Rey realizes what she needs to do. She puts her lightsaber behind her back and passes it to Ben Solo through the Force. Ben then uses the lightsaber to destroy the Knights of Ren before meeting up with Rey and fighting against Palpatine side by side. However, they were completely outmatched by Palpatine, and he could easily ragdoll Ben Solo hundreds of meters. But as we all know, this is Disney, and Rey is the main protagonist, and she can obviously fight back against a Sith Lord who can take down a whole fleet with just their Force lightning. She then seemingly blocks the same power of lightning and says the cringerous line before using two lightsabers to redirect the lightning onto Palpatine and killing him. This is when Ben Solo returns to the scene to find Rey dead on the ground. You can see he truly feels regretful in this moment about everything he has done and realizes that the dark side took everything away from him. In desperation, Ben tries to use the Force to bring Rey back from the dead, and it surprisingly works. Ben and Rey then kiss and everything seems okay, and Ben finally has some decent character development until Disney decides he had enough and killed him off. This was an extremely disappointing ending, especially as he just developed as a character. In conclusion, Kylo Ren started off as a relentless and fearful dark side ruler before becoming an emotionally damaged guy who can't decide who is good or bad, and once he did, it was abruptly ended with his death. Kylo Ren had huge potential, but in all honesty, he could never live up to it, or maybe he just could never live up to the potential of his grandfather.